Ever get that feeling, like what you want? It's not really your want. It's more like someone ELSE decided it was worth wanting. Kind of makes you think, huh, well, get ready, because that's exactly what we're diving into today, mimetic desire.
And to help us unpack all this, I've got our expert guide with us. They're kind of like masters at connecting philosophy, history.
Yeah,
We might even get a little brain science today. Who knows?
sounds like fun.
Right. So mimetic desire, I gotta admit, it's a new one for me. I'm ready to go deep, though. What's the core idea here?
Well, in a nutshell, mimetic desire is this idea that we pick up what we want by watching what other people want.
Yep.
And it's not always conscious copying either. It's deeper, often unconscious,
So it's not just me wanting the same, like, sneakers as my friends.
Exactly. It goes way beyond that.
Mhm.
In fact, our source material even talks about babies, like newborns, just 36 hours old.
Mm.
They're already mimicking facial expressions. That drive to imitate, it sticks with us. It grows into our desires, shapes what we want out of life.
36 hours old. Wow. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? It's not like those babies are on Instagram looking for the next cool thing.
You got it. It shows how deep this imitation thing really is. And you're right, it's not just stuff we want to buy. This wanting what others have. It gets into our careers, relationships, even our taste in music.
You know what? That reminds me of something. Back in college, my roommate was obsessed with this, like, totally obscure band, posters everywhere, playing their music nonstop. And guess what? I went from not caring at all to being a huge fan. Looking back, that's mimetic desire right there.
Textbook example.
Mm-hmm.
And it highlights how this whole unconscious imitation thing, it shapes our preferences in ways we don't even realize. It's not about being unoriginal or anything. It's about, recognizing the subtle ways we're influenced.
So if we're all taking cues from each other about what to want, wouldn't that lead to a lot of, well, competition?
You're hitting on a crucial point. When we all want the same thing, especially something scarce or exclusive, things can get a bit messy. And that's where Girard's theory, it takes a turn. Gets kind of dark, actually.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What happens when those desires, when they clash? How do societies deal with that kind of tension?
Girard says societies develop these elaborate mechanisms, ways to manage the potential chaos. We see it everywhere. Social norms, hierarchies, laws, even in religious beliefs. But the most fascinating and maybe disturbing mechanism he talks about is the scapegoat mechanism.
The scapegoat mechanism. Okay, that sounds ominous.
It is. Imagine a society on the brink. Everyone wants the same things. Tensions are high. The scapegoat mechanism, it kicks in when one person or sometimes a group gets singled out as the cause of all the problems.
So instead of everyone fighting amongst themselves, they all direct that energy towards this scapegoat.
You got it. And the really tragic part, the scapegoat is often totally innocent. Their only crime is being different, vulnerable, sometimes just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's heavy. But I have to admit, it does sound kind of familiar. Like, we still see this happening today, even if it's not always so obvious.
You're right to make that connection.
Yeah.
But before we jump to today's world, let's dig a bit deeper into how this scapegoat thing played out historically. Our sources talk about old myths, right? They often present the scapegoat as guilty, masking what's really going on. It makes you wonder, have we really moved past this need for a scapegoat? Or does it just show up in different ways now?
Big questions. But before we tackle that, something else from our reading really caught my eye. Girard's take on Christianity. He seems to think it was revolutionary, and it all comes back to this idea of the scapegoat. Can you tell us more about that?
You picked up on that, you're right. Girard argues that Christianity doesn't endorse the scapegoat mechanism, but rather it exposes it. It shows it for what it is, this horrible act of collective violence against an innocent victim.
So we just dove deep into all this philosophy, the historical stuff too, with mimetic desire and this whole scapegoat thing. But is there a scientific side to this? Something about how it actually works in our brains?
That's the really cool part. See, when Girard first came out with his theories, it was mostly based on just, observing people throughout history and literature, things like that. But then, get this, 1992 rolls around and scientists, they discover mirror neurons. Suddenly, Girard's ideas, they've got some biological backup.
Yeah, our source material mentioned that too, and I gotta say, that really got me thinking. Mirror neurons. It's like we're peeking into the control room of our own minds. What's the connection to mimetic desire?
Okay, so picture this. You're watching someone reach for this pastry, right? It looks delicious. It's a simple action. But here's the wild part. In your brain, certain neurons, they're firing as if you were reaching for the pastry. That's what mirror neurons do. They fire both when we do something and when we see someone else doing it.
So it's not just about copying movements, these mirror neurons, they're picking up on the emotions too, the desires behind those actions.
Exactly. That's where it gets really interesting when we're talking about mimetic desire. When
Mm.
you see someone like light up with desire for that pastry, your mirror neurons, they're already firing away, creating a similar feeling in you, even if you weren't even thinking about pastries before.
It makes sense. It's like we evolved to get each other, empathize, but
Yeah.
that same wiring makes us, I don't know, vulnerable to this whole unconscious imitation thing. No wonder advertising works so well.
Exactly. Advertisers, they've been onto this forever.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that, right? Think about social media. It's mimetic desire on overdrive. Influencers showing off these perfect lives, and bam, we unconsciously absorb those desires, make them our own.
It's so true. All of a sudden, everyone needs the new phone, the outfit, that lifestyle, and it's not even like a choice a lot of the time. Our brains are like, well, they seem happy with that. I want that too.
And again, it's not about saying wanting things is wrong. It's
Yeah.
part of being human, right? Wanting a better life, all that. It's about recognizing how much of that is shaped by outside forces and how that awareness can help us make better choices.
So knowledge is power. The more we get this mimetic desire thing, the more we can step back from those influences and make choices that actually line up with what we care about.
100%. And
Yeah.
this is where Girard's work really shines. He's not saying get rid of desire. That's probably impossible anyway.
Mhm.
It's about, seeing the forces at work, questioning what we want, and ultimately being more self-aware, more authentic in our choices.
We were talking about influencers before, how they're like these, I don't know, models of desire. But what about the other side of that, like cancel culture? Our source mentioned that as a modern version of scapegoating.
Right. It's definitely a parallel to think about. How quickly someone in the public eye becomes, the target of all this outrage, all this scrutiny. Maybe they made a mistake, said something dumb, or sometimes it's just an accusation. They become the scapegoat, right? Carrying the weight of our need to blame someone, take out our frustrations.
It's like the whole internet turns into this massive digital coliseum or something. Everyone's ready to judge and demand consequences.
And that's not to say all criticism is wrong
Yeah.
or that people shouldn't be held accountable, but it's the mechanism that's fascinating. It's that same scapegoat thing Girard was talking about, just, sped up and amplified by the internet.
It feels like nuance goes out the window, and it becomes more about the outrage itself than actually trying to figure things out or make things right.
That's the big danger with any scapegoat mechanism, whether it's some ancient ritual or happening online. We skip over actually thinking. We project all our own stuff onto this one target, and we might end up punishing someone innocent while missing the bigger picture completely.
It really is amazing to see how this whole scapegoating thing, this pattern, it keeps showing up, even in today's world, with the internet and everything. Makes you wonder, where do we go from here? If this mimetic desire is so deeply rooted in us, is there any way to, like, fight back, break free?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's some easy answer, some magic solution that
Ah.
works for everyone. But like we've been saying this whole time, it starts with awareness. Once we see how much our desires are shaped by other people, we can start to question them, create some space between what we actually want and what everyone else is telling us to want.
So it's like hitting the pause button, right? Before we jump on the latest trend, before we get swept up in some online mob, before we make some big life decision based on what we think we should be doing, we take a second, ask ourselves, wait, do I even want this? Or am I just caught up in this mimetic desire thing?
Exactly. It's about cultivating self-awareness,
Mhm.
questioning. I call it desire literacy.
Desire literacy. I like that. It's like learning this whole new language, one that helps us decode all these messages we're bombarded with, the
Mhm.
culture, social media, even our own thoughts, right?
You got it. And the more fluent we get in this desire language, the more we can make choices that actually reflect our values, our own aspirations,
Mm.
instead of just reacting to everyone else.
This has been honestly eye-opening. So as we wrap up, is there one big takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with today?
If there's one thing I hope sticks with you, it's this. If so much of what we want is shaped by other people, what does it really mean to have authentic desires? What do you want when you strip away all the noise, all the shoulds and expectations? Think about that.
That's a powerful question, one that I think will stick with people. Me, I'm definitely seeing the world a bit differently now, noticing all these mimetic desires popping up everywhere. And with that, we'll leave you all to your own explorations. Until next time, happy diving.